Hi, this is Pam from the Hooked on Sewing blog. In this video tutorial, I'd like to talk to you about your sewing machine needle plate, or your throat plate as it's also called. Let's take a look. So my sewing machine comes with two different throat plates. This is my zigzag stitch throat plate, and I also have a straight stitch throat plate or needle plate for my sewing machine. Let me show you first of all how to swap these out. So I'm going to raise my presser foot to the highest position. I'll remove the arm, it just slides out like that. And then there is a button or a lever here on the front of the machine. I will press on it, and then my needle plate is going to pop up. Pops up just like that. So no screws or screwdrivers or any tools are needed to remove or replace this needle plate. Now, like I said, needle plate is oftentimes called a throat plate. This is the throat of the sewing machine, and this is the plate that goes on the throat. You will notice that this throat plate has a wide opening here for the starting needle position. That is where my sewing machine needle will go up and down, catching the bobbin thread and doing the stitching. So if I'm doing a zigzag or some kind of decorative stitch, I will want to be sure to use my zigzag needle plate. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you about this needle plate are these vertical and horizontal lines that you will see on the plate here. You'll also see some numbers, 1/2 inch, 5/8, 3/4, 1, 1.5, 2. And right down here is a vertical line that's etched here and here on my plate. These are to mark the 5/8 inch seam allowance. So you'll see I have a 5/8 inch seam allowance mark right here too. So what I would do is I would line up my fabric, the edge of my fabric, with this 5/8 inch mark. And if I was turning a corner, I would sew until my fabric, the edge of my fabric reaches these marks here. And when it reaches these marks, I know that I've reached my 5/8 inch seam allowance. I'll lift my presser foot with my needle still down, rotate my fabric counterclockwise, and I will have a perfectly stitched 5/8 inch seam. So like I said, this is my zigzag foot, and this is my straight stitch needle plate. This is my bobbin cover, and this is the thread cutter for the bobbin, and the back of the needle plate. This needle plate goes into my sewing machine. Let me move this thread out of the way. I just slide it under the presser foot, and these two pieces slide under the lip. There's a little groove there for them to fit into, and I just lay it down so that it's nice and even with the sewing machine. There's a circle here on the top of the plate, this circle here, and I'm just going to press down on that until it pops into place. You have to press down on it kind of firmly. And my thread is out of the way. And this is the cover for my bobbin. I just simply slide this button towards the right, and the cover will pop up, and I pull it out. And you'll notice that my bobbin cover also continues to have the vertical stitch or seam guides printed on the cover. And it also has a picture depicting which way the bobbin should be placed into the bobbin holder and how the thread should be wound. So I'll remove my cover, and then I can just simply pull the bobbins out of the machine. Replace my bobbin, just drop it back down in there. So I'll load my bobbin, pull the thread underneath the thread guide and around to the thread cutter, and then you'll see there are arrows showing you exactly where to pull the thread, and once I pull it towards the right, it will neatly trim off that bobbin thread. Then I can replace the cover. Again, I'm just going to slide these tips into their space, and then I'll push down on the bobbin cover. And there I changed out my throat plate or my needle plate with a straight stitch guide. Now you would want to use this straight stitch anytime you're sewing a straight stitch, or if you're dealing with delicate fabrics, it will help to keep those delicate fabrics from being pulled down into your bobbin area or below your feed dogs. Here you have a much wider opening and more opportunity for material to be pulled down into there. So that's why you would want to use your straight foot or your straight stitch needle plate when you're sewing straight stitches, and save your zigzag stitch for when you're truly doing decorative or zigzag stitches, or for example when you're doing buttonholes. So this is our needle plate or throat plate, as I told you it was called. And again, it has guide marks, sewing seam guide marks going vertically down the plate, that they are literally etched into this needle plate. And again, let me demonstrate. So I would take my fabric and I would line up the raw edge with this 5/8 inch. You can see it comes all the way down here and up my sewing machine with this 5/8 inch. I like to start with the fabric just behind the opening in my presser foot. So with the fabric lined up, the raw edge with the 5/8 inch seam allowance, I'll lower my presser foot, and I'll also lower my needle to the starting position. And then I will stitch, keeping my fabric, and let me show you how to turn the corner. So again, I'm keeping my fabric even with that stitch guide, 5/8 inch seam guide on my presser plate or needle plate. And then when I get close to the bottom edge of my fabric and I can see that I'm getting close to 5/8 of an inch, I'm going to be on the lookout for this mark right here. And when my fabric lines up with that mark, I will know it's time to rotate my fabric. And right there. So I have my fabric is lined up with the 5/8 inch mark on the sewing machine. I'll lift my presser foot, rotate my fabric, lower my presser foot, and continue to sew with the side of the fabric lining up with the 5/8 inch mark on my sewing machine. So with this lined up, I'm going to continue to stitch, keeping my fabric even with the 5/8 inch mark on that needle plate. When I get close to where I think the 5/8 inch is, I can also use my seam gauge to see where I am in my stitch, and raise up my presser foot with the needle down, and I can see that I still have a couple more stitches to go. So lower my presser foot and take a couple stitches. I can raise my presser foot, put my seam gauge there, and see that I have 5/8 inch. So I'll rotate my fabric, making sure again that the edges are lined up, lower my presser foot, and continue to sew. Now, if I get to where I want to turn my corner and I have gone too far, so I'll take my ruler and I have it marked at the 5/8 inch mark, and I can see that that seam is going to be too narrow. So what I'm going to do is lower my presser foot, and I'm going to take a couple of stitches in reverse. Raise my presser foot and check that seam allowance. And there I have my 5/8 inch. rotate my fabric, lower my presser foot, and I can continue sewing. Now, if that seam allowance was too wide, let me back up here a little bit. Say I stopped here and I put my seam gauge and I can clearly see that I haven't gone far enough. So I'll just lower my presser foot and make a couple of stitches forward. Check, raise my presser foot and check again. There we go. Now I'm ready to rotate my fabric, line up the edge with the 5/8 inch marks on my sewing machine, and continue sewing. That's how you use the needle plate or the throat plate on your sewing machine to line up your seams and sew perfectly straight seams and corners every time. You'll notice, because my machine is a quilting machine, that it also has these 45, 40, 90, 120 degree marks. So if I needed to sew at a 90 degree or 45 degree seam, I would know when I would have that lined up by using the seam guide on my needle plate. Thank you for watching my YouTube video on how to use your needle plate. If you have questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And be sure to visit me over on the Hooked on Sewing blog and subscribe to my newsletter so you'll be notified of new tutorials, videos, and patterns that are made available. I'd also appreciate it if you would like this video if you found it helpful, and be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you.